Two names once ruled London's underworld, one with a smile and a blade, the other with silence and a set of pliers. They didn't just commit crimes, they built empires. But between the Kray Twins and the Richardson Gang, who truly reigned through fear? And more importantly, why do we still remember them like legends? Stay patient with me until the end of this video. Welcome to Red Dossier.
Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.
They dressed like gentlemen. They smiled like celebrities. They ran London like kings. In the East End, two brothers ruled the nightclubs, protected by charm and sharpened by fear. Ronnie Kray and Reggie Kray, twin brothers whose faces appeared in newspapers as often as their crimes appeared in court records. To some, they were symbols of local pride. To others, they were cold-blooded killers who carved their legacy into the heart of post-war London. Across the river, in South London, another name whispered through alleys and offices alike. Charlie Richardson. His gang didn't pose for the cameras. They didn't court fame. They operated in silence, behind doors locked tight, where screams were drowned out by drills and blackmail inked into paper. Charlie Richardson built an empire, not on glory, but on control. Two powers, one city, but only one question. Who was the more dangerous man? The killer who smiled for the cameras, or the businessman who never needed to? The Kray Twins were known for their violence, yes, but also their visibility. They shook hands with politicians, dined with actors, and owned nightclubs where stars and criminals shared booths. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be respected. Ronnie once declared that fear and fame were the same currency. Richardson, on the other hand, had no desire for attention. He believed in systems, in punishments logged like financial ledgers. His enemies weren't shot in public. They were taken to the shop, a room where the tools weren't weapons, but instruments, pliers, electrodes, hammers. Pain was business, not spectacle. The press loved the Krays. Their story was easy to sell, twins with a tragic past, rising to power like gangster royalty. Richardson? He barely made headlines, but every man in the South knew his rules. Pay on time, speak no names, and never cross the gang. Both empires were forged in the same furnace, post-war London, where bombs had stopped falling, but hunger hadn't, where law was thin and loyalty thicker than blood. Both families rose from poverty, both offered protection, and both, inevitably, left bodies behind. As the city rebuilt itself with concrete and ambition, these two names, Kray and Richardson, cast shadows longer than any tower. Their legends begin with style and status, but the truth, that lies deeper in the cold machinery of violence and in the twisted psychology of men who chose fear as their legacy. Now let's go further, not into their images, but into their minds. Where did they come from, and what made them choose the path that even other criminals feared to walk? Ronnie and Reggie Kray were born in 1933 in a working-class neighborhood of East London. Their childhood was shaped by wartime bombings, absent authority, and a local culture that valued toughness over tenderness. Their father, a boxer who often vanished to avoid military service, left their mother to raise the twins in an environment where survival was a matter of reputation. From early on, the Krays understood that fear could be currency and violence a language of control. They flirted with legitimacy. Both trained as boxers. Both wore sharp suits and spoke politely. But underneath the polished surface, something darker stirred, especially in Ronnie. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but never treated consistently. His delusions mixed with ambition, and when power came within reach, he seized it with both hands. Reggie, more calculating, enabled his brother's madness while building the business side of their empire: extortion, racketeering, protection deals, and control over high-end nightclubs. The Krays killed when they needed to. George Cornell was shot in the head by Ronnie in a crowded pub, simply for showing disrespect. Jack the Hat McVitie was stabbed to death by Reggie in a moment meant to send a message: loyalty or death. Their violence wasn't strategic, it was theatrical. Their crimes didn't stay in the dark. They lit them like bonfires. Charlie Richardson's path was colder and more calculated. Raised in South London, he was surrounded by petty crime from an early age. But unlike the Krays, he approached crime like a business. He founded front companies, trucking firms, electrical services, repair shops that masked a violent, sprawling underworld. Richardson didn't crave fame. He craved efficiency. His method of discipline was notorious. Victims who crossed the gang were brought to what became known as the torture chamber. Teeth were extracted with pliers. Toes were crushed. Electric shocks were applied to genitals, and all of it, reportedly, was logged. Pain as procedure. The operation had levels, roles, enforcers. Unlike the Krays, who acted out of rage or revenge, Richardson's violence was bureaucratic. But systems, like men, crack. The Krays' downfall began with arrogance. Killing in public may have sent a message, but it also invited attention. Scotland Yard had avoided challenging the twins for years, fearing both corruption and retaliation. But as the bodies piled up and the press turned sour, the tide shifted. Detectives began building a case in silence, cultivating witnesses in the shadows. In 1968, the twins were arrested. A year later, both were sentenced to life imprisonment. Richardson, too, fell, but not to spectacle. His mistake was trusting too many people, too deeply. In 1966, during what came to be known as the torture trial, testimonies from former associates painted a detailed portrait of an empire built on agony. 7 key charges were brought against him, including assault, kidnapping, and grievous bodily harm. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In both cases, it wasn't the rivals who toppled them. It was the people closest to them. Betrayal came not with bullets, but with depositions. While the Krays saw themselves as legends and were treated as such by tabloids, the Richardson Gang faded into silence. Yet among law enforcement, Richardson's methods were often viewed as the more dangerous. His violence wasn't erratic. It was planned. It didn't flare and vanish. It endured. So which is more terrifying, the man who kills in a flash of rage, or the one who tortures with a calm hand and a clipboard? We know what they did. We know how it ended. But what did it all mean? And why does their story still haunt London today? That answer lies in how we remember them, and in what we choose to forget. The Kray Twins spent their remaining years behind walls that no longer bowed to their names. Ronnie, the unhinged architect of public executions, was eventually declared insane and moved to Broadmoor Hospital, where he died in 1995. His delusions never left him. He claimed to see enemies in the mirrors, to hear voices whispering threats that never came. Reggie, once the smoother of the two, with eyes on legitimacy and deals that flirted with legality, spent over 3 decades in prison before being released on compassionate grounds. He died of cancer in 2000, free technically, but broken, a shadow of the man who once ruled East London with clenched fists and a cigarette smile. Charlie Richardson, for all his precision, served nearly 20 years. When he was finally released in 1984, he returned to a London that no longer remembered his rules. He spoke little, wrote nothing of substance, and lived the rest of his life in silence. He died in 2012, not as a name printed on shirts or glorified in films, but as a footnote in criminal history. And perhaps that was his final control, fading out on his own terms, without myth, without spectacle. Both men, or all three if we count both twins separately, built empires, but one was made of mirrors and the other of cold metal. The Krays thrived on image, on being seen. Their legend was carefully constructed through photo ops, staged interviews, and public violence. It worked. Even today, tourists pose outside former Kray haunts, and their faces remain etched in pop culture like anti-heroes, but they weren't clever strategists. Their power had no depth. When pressure came, they cracked. Richardson's myth was never shaped by the public. It was shaped in courtrooms, in bruised witness statements, in sealed police files. His control was logistical, not emotional. Some experts argue that this made him more dangerous. His operation could have survived him, if not for betrayal. The Krays died with their egos. Richardson's system died with its records. So how do we weigh their legacies? Ronnie and Reggie Kray were convicted of 2 murders, but their reign created an atmosphere where witnesses vanished, where judges hesitated, where fear became law. Charlie Richardson wasn't convicted of killing anyone, but the stories that emerged from his torture rooms painted a cruelty no less devastating. One used a gun in public, the other used electricity in silence. Perhaps the most disturbing truth is how easily their stories have been absorbed into folklore. The Krays were portrayed by Hollywood actors. Their names decorate T-shirts, pubs, even fan fiction. The idea of them as local boys who made it big erases the blood they spilled. Richardson is less known, less mythologized, but his legacy lives in the practices he normalized, the quiet weaponizing of fear, the idea that brutality works best when no one's looking. Both cases show us the cost of romanticizing violence. When we turn gangsters into legends, we erase the lives they destroyed. We forget the mothers who buried sons, the shopkeepers who paid protection, the silence that covered screams. And we do something worse. We invite the next monster to believe that power can be beautiful. There is no glory in domination, no nobility in brutality, no legacy worth remembering when it's built on pain. And yet, we remember them. So the question that remains is not which man was crueler or which gang left more scars. It's why decades later, we still choose to speak their names. They wore suits, not masks. They dined with politicians and tortured in private. But power, built on violence, always collapses, whether it parades through nightclubs or hides behind warehouses. So now we ask you, which is more terrifying, the gangster who needs to be seen or the one who controls from the dark? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If this story gripped you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Red Dossier for more true crime that cuts deeper. We'll be waiting.